Have you ever felt trapped by the endless advice, formulas, and systems that promise to solve your life's problems? In our modern world, we're bombarded with step-by-step guides for everything. How to be happy, how to find love, how to achieve success, how to be spiritual. Bookstores overflow with self-help manuals. Social media feeds us daily doses of life hacks, and experts everywhere claim to have discovered the secret formula for living well. Yet despite all this accumulated wisdom, why do so many of us still feel lost, anxious, and disconnected from authentic living? The answer lies in a profound misunderstanding about the very nature of life itself. We've been conditioned to believe that life is a problem to be solved, when in reality, it's a mystery to be lived. Today, we'll explore why there's no formula for life, and more importantly, how embracing this truth can liberate you from the endless search for certainty and open you to the raw, immediate beauty of existence as it unfolds moment by moment. The human mind perpetually craves certainty. It wants a map, an equation, a model to explain everything. From eating and raising children to healing illness, from enlightenment and love to living righteously, everything gets pulled into a whirlpool of formulaic thinking. But life is not a mathematical problem. It doesn't operate according to a fixed equation, nor does it submit to any system of knowledge. Intellectual people, however well-intentioned, often impose thinking models on a life. They analyze, systematize, interpret, and offer right paths. But in their very effort to make life comprehensible, they inadvertently make it rigid, limited, and impoverished. Because life cannot be boxed in. Life is ceaseless movement. It's non-linear, non-repetitive, unpredictable. Each moment is a unique manifestation. Nothing from the past can be completely applied to the present. No formula can show you how to live correctly. Every model, however sophisticated, is merely a shadow of reality, not reality itself. But humans fear this. They fear the unknown. They fear having no predetermined path. And so they cling to books, theories, religions, moralities, philosophies. They believe that if they follow the right formula, they'll be safe. But this very clinging creates disorder. Because when you live by formula, you're living from memory, not from direct perception. You're reacting according to programming, not living in true freedom. There is no path to freedom. Each person must walk alone in their own darkness, observing each step without a map. It's precisely in the state of uncertainty, of not knowing beforehand, that authentic life reveals itself. And only when you stop seeking formulas do you begin to touch the unthinkable. Intellectuals often think that understanding will liberate them. But truly, it's the clinging to understanding that becomes the chain. Knowledge, if not recognized for what it is, becomes a wall preventing you from touching what is. It's no longer a tool, but an obstacle. And you'll see the world not with fresh eyes, but through the lens of what you already know. True humility doesn't come from knowing much, but from recognizing that nothing can fully grasp life. You cannot summarize the sacred in a doctrine. You cannot define love in words. You cannot map the journey of awakening with logical diagrams. All such attempts betray the nature of what is living. Instead of asking, "How should I live?" observe how you are actually living. Instead of seeking advice from others, listen to the silence within a mind. Because every formula, however refined, is a product of thought. And thought, by its very nature, is always old. It can never touch the new, the never-before known, which is life happening right now. When you stop imposing any formula on life, you begin to live with sensitivity. You start listening to everything as if hearing it for the first time. You see the world not through the lens of understanding, but with pure presence. And in that state, you need no philosophy, no models, no ideals. Because you're living reality. There's nothing to pursue, nothing to become, no formula to follow. Only life, breathing, moving, unmeasurable, unknowable, inexplicable. This insight into the formulaic nature of modern living reveals itself most clearly when we examine how we've been conditioned to approach every aspect of existence. Consider how we've turned even the most intimate experiences into systems and methodologies. Parenting has become a series of techniques and strategies. Relationships are reduced to communication formulas and compatibility algorithms. Spirituality is packaged into meditation programs and enlightenment roadmaps. Even creativity is taught through step-by-step processes and proven methods. But what happens when we live this way? We become mechanical. We lose touch with the spontaneous intelligence that naturally arises when we're fully present to what is. A mother doesn't need a parenting manual to know when her child needs comfort. She feels it directly. A lover doesn't require relationship advice to know when to speak and when to remain silent. The moment itself reveals what's needed. An artist doesn't need creative formulas to express truth. Authentic expression flows from immediate contact with life. The tragedy is that we've been educated out of this natural responsiveness. From childhood, we're taught to think first, analyze, compare with what we've learned, and then act. This creates a gap between perception and response, between life and our living of it. We become secondhand beings, living through borrowed knowledge rather than direct experience. Watch yourself throughout a typical day. How often do you respond immediately to what's happening? And how often do you first consult your mental database of appropriate responses? When someone speaks to you, do you listen with your whole being, or are you already formulating your reply based on similar conversations you've had before? When you feel angry or sad, do you allow the feeling to be fully present, or do you immediately try to manage it according to emotional regulation techniques you've learned? This constant referencing to stored knowledge creates a peculiar kind of suffering. We're always one step removed from life. We're living in translation, experiencing everything through the filter of what we think we know. And because life is constantly changing, constantly new, our old knowledge is perpetually inadequate to meet the present moment. The most profound example of this can be seen in how we approach psychological and emotional healing. Modern therapy, while valuable in many ways, often falls into the trap of creating new formulas for wellness. Clients learn coping strategies, thought patterns, behavioral modifications. They're given tools and techniques to manage their inner lives. But what if the very attempt to manage and control our psychological experience is part of the problem? What if healing isn't about learning better ways to handle our emotions, but about discovering the space in which emotions arise and pass away? What if peace isn't achieved through positive thinking techniques, but through recognizing the awareness that remains untouched by both positive and negative thoughts? What if freedom isn't found by following a spiritual path, but by seeing through the very seeker who wants to be free? These questions point to something radical. The possibility that our problems aren't solved by better formulas, but by questioning our fundamental assumption that life is a problem to be solved in the first place. When we deeply investigate this assumption, we may discover that what we call problems are often just life expressing itself in ways that don't match our preferences or expectations. Consider the experience of uncertainty, which most people try to eliminate through planning, goal setting, and security building. But uncertainty is not actually a problem. It's the very nature of a living universe. Everything is in constant flux. Nothing remains the same. The attempt to create certainty in an uncertain world is like trying to freeze a flowing river. It's not only impossible, but it cuts us off from the dynamic aliveness that uncertainty brings. When we stop fighting uncertainty and instead learn to move with it, something extraordinary happens. We become fluid, responsive, creative. We stop wasting energy trying to control what cannot be controlled, and instead use that energy to dance with whatever arises. We discover that uncertainty isn't the enemy of peace, it's the very condition that makes authentic peace possible. Because real peace isn't the absence of change, but the capacity to remain centered within change. This same principle applies to every area where we've created formulas for living. Take the pursuit of happiness, which has become an entire industry. We're told that happiness comes from positive thinking, gratitude practices, achieving goals, maintaining relationships, finding purpose, and countless other prescriptions. But what if happiness isn't something to be achieved or maintained? What if it's our natural state when we stop doing the things that make us unhappy? Most of our unhappiness comes from resistance to what is. We want things to be different than they are. We want people to behave differently. We want our circumstances to change. We want our thoughts and feelings to be other than what they are. This constant wanting creates a state of internal conflict that we then try to resolve through various happiness formulas. But what if instead of trying to become happy, we simply stopped making ourselves unhappy? What if we investigated the mechanism of resistance itself? When we do this, we often discover that our resistance is based on stories we tell ourselves about how things should be. These stories come from our conditioning, our past experiences, our cultural programming. They're not based on direct perception of what's actually happening right now. When we see this clearly, resistance begins to dissolve naturally. Not because we've applied a technique to let go, but because we've seen through the illusion that was creating the resistance in the first place. And in that dissolution, what remains is a natural ease, a spontaneous well-being that doesn't depend on circumstances being a particular way. This understanding transforms how we approach every challenge in life. Instead of immediately reaching for solutions, strategies, and formulas, we first pause and investigate what's actually happening. We look at our assumptions, our expectations, our stories about the situation. We examine whether what we're calling a problem is actually a problem or simply life expressing itself in a way we haven't yet learned to embrace. And that is the greatest beauty of all.